And our topic today that we're just going to get things started with is taxes. Nobody, it should be a four-letter word, right? Taxes. We as authors are always looking for opportunities, ideas of ways that we can get more deductions. There's always questions that come up this time of year. And then for those of us who have look back on the year and say, I should have done better recording things and pulling things together. Now is a good time to take a break and really ask yourself, what are you going to do differently this year so that at the end of the year and early 2025, you're not going to end up in the same situation. So I have an amazing guest with me here today. Jay Butler Kyle. We have earlier today at the 1 p.m. Q&A, she talked a little bit and we were answering questions about taxes. And we'll do some more of that, but we're probably going to be able to dive in deeper on the Schedule C, right? And let me just make sure I share, give you an opportunity again to go ahead and share a little bit of your background. And before I introduce you formally, I'll go ahead and just, for those of you who don't already know me, my name is April Cox. I am the founder and CEO of Little Labradoodle Publishing. My YouTube channel, Self-Publishing Made Simple with April Cox, is really all geared on teaching you how to self-publish. And I'm here today with, again, my weekly Q&A I do at 1 p.m. Eastern and 8 p.m. Eastern every Wednesday. And it gives you an opportunity to drop in with any questions about self-publishing. We'll start with tax topics for today, and then we'll open it up wider, broader for others who have other questions. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the baton over to my beautiful co-host here. Go ahead, Jay Butler Kyle.
Hi, my name is Jan. Jay Butler Kyle is my author name, and my tax background back in the early 90s, at the time, the only two states that required you be licensed by the state was the state of Oregon and Delaware. And so I became a certified tax preparer under the state of Oregon. And then when we moved to the island in Southeast Alaska, I was actually on island, I was H&R Block's remote tax preparer. So I've been doing taxes forever, and Schedule C just happens to be one of my favorites. I think it's fun. So
there are crazy people out there that think taxes are fun, and numbers make my eyes gloss over and roll behind my head. I just get like so sidetracked. I can't, it's all of a sudden I have ADD and I can't think clearly when there's numbers or taxes involved. So my apologies. I have all the respect in the world for people like yourself who can do this.
Well, there are some subjects that are more difficult. Depreciation. There's several subjects. Use of your business home office. That one's pretty in depth. Earlier, someone had asked about being able to hire their child as an employee. That one turns out to be quite in depth also. So even though I can prepare taxes, that's as simple as plunking numbers onto a form. To be informed, you need to talk to your accountant or a legal tax advisor, someone of that scope.
Right. Okay. So let me just start by saying, when you talk about a Schedule C, what is that?
If you go to irs.gov, which I know nobody likes the IRS, but they really are your friend when it comes to downloading information. So a Schedule C is a front and back form. It's called the profit or loss from business. And as a sole proprietor or a single member LLC, that's the form you'll file with the IRS. And it goes along with your 1040 and whatever other forms you might have.
Okay. And I know that prior to my engaging with an accountant, I was using TurboTax and just kind of walking through and entering information step by step. How do you feel about things like TurboTax for authors and individuals like us who have, publishing, maybe an LLC, maybe just sole proprietors? Is that something you would recommend, or does it depend?
Unfortunately, it depends. I'm an old-fashioned person, so I like paper. I have never filed my taxes online, in part because ours is a bit complicated. And in the early days when software was just coming out, we just didn't fit the profile. So it wouldn't work for us anyway. And I like paper. So I download the publications. I don't necessarily print them, but I do recommend that the page. So, for example, just a simple 1040. There's a booklet that you can download that tells you all of the line by line. That's exactly what it does. And the instructions for Schedule C are also line by line by line. So you can read about it. If that particular line applies to you, I recommend you print that page, or at least make note of the page and section number, why you took that deduction based on what you read, so that if anything comes up later, you can come straight away back to it and go, oh, I did this because. And if you come to the IRS and say, I did it for these reasons based on your information,
Hmm.
you're ahead of the game. So as far as the software goes, a lot of people use it, and I understand it makes it easy, but I use QuickBooks Pro, and that gives me all the numbers I need to just plunk it into the Schedule C.
So QuickBooks Pro versus
Quick,
Quicken and QuickBooks Regular. Do you have any comments on the different types of software?
I have never used anything but QuickBooks Pro. I
Okay.
started in the night, golly, I think it was like 97 was the first time I used it. And I came up with Pro. It may not be that now, it may just be QuickBooks. But Quicken is also a good one. I think it's the simplistic form of QuickBooks.
Okay.
But I know with QuickBooks Pro, you've made your entries for the year. At the end of the year, you push the button for tax summary, and up come all the numbers because you've set up the categories based on the categories of expenses. There's all your numbers. You just put them, copy and paste essentially.
Yeah. So for those of you that are joining us either live here on Zoom or on YouTube, feel free to post your questions about taxes. Nancy says, I have another business that I've been filing for years. Can I use this business with my publishing COL? I'm not sure. Publishing, combining the two. Is that right, Nancy?
I think so. I think now, if you've been doing it for years, this goes back to the activity code that I mentioned earlier today. That would be under the publishing activity code. Um, unless unless your income is derived so from two different sources, totally two different sources, I would think you could combine it.
So, like we had earlier in the day, we had someone who was doing a chiropractic business and now publishing as well. So that those were two separate ones, correct? And that would be
Correct.
have to be handled differently.
Correct. I think where the question would come in would be whether you're using the activity code for publication versus activity code for writer.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, let's see. Just looking quickly here. Denise says, just the letters IRS send me into a sweat. I'm the same way, Denise. Don't worry. Um, Josie says, I'm a paper girl too.
Yeah.
So it looks like I don't have, oh yeah, so Nia, uh, uh, commenting a little bit further, she says her business is a pet sitting business.
Okay.
Yeah, so they would have to be done separately.
Yeah, two separate businesses, because when you file your Schedule C, you'll have to put in the enter the code from the instructions, which is on line B, and that would be the writing code.
So that would mean you're filing one income tax return, but you might be filing two Schedule Cs. Is that right?
Yes. Now, in that case, you've got two separate, the chiropractic lady and this business. When you have the bottom line, you'll have whether profit or loss, but you'll have numbers at the bottom line. You'll go over to a Schedule SE, self-employed, and you can that schedule you can combine. So for example, let's say in your pet sitting business, you've got a profit, but you have a loss in your writing business. So you would take say the pet sitting was $1,000 and the profit, and the writing is a $300 loss. You would only file on $700. Your self-employment would be on $700. And then they allow you to take, in this case, $350 off your 1040.
And what does that off the 1040, what does that come from?
So when you're coming down on your 1040, and I didn't think to print one out, but there'll be a section where you've paid into health care. Yeah. Golly, I can't think of some of the others. Possibly a student loan. Anyway, it will say amount paid to self-employment for self-employment taxes. And so you can take that off your income.
Okay. Denise has a great question here. She says, is there a certain amount of money or threshold that once you reach it, you're now considered a business and you must declare it as a business, making a profit versus hobby income, perhaps is what I think she's referring to.
And yes, there is a $600 threshold. You do not have to file a Schedule C until you do not have to file a Schedule C until you've earned more than $400. So anything under 400, you don't have to claim it. However, this is where you get into business startup and amortization. And that's where I was talking about the depreciation earlier. That is a very in-depth, it goes beyond the Schedule C. You have to do other schedules to come up with information to put on the Schedule C. So as someone who's giving a topic who is not an authority on it, I am not a legal tax, I'm not a legal tax advisor.
Right.
You have to choose when you've started your business. You have to choose a date. I began my business this day. Any expense you incurred prior to this date is business startup. Anything after that is a business expense. Now, the downfall of business startup is it is amortized over 180 months. That's 15 years. And you divide 180 by the amount of business startup, and that's how much you can deduct, well, monthly, but you would take 12 of them to make your yearly business startup. So if I was doing this again, I would think about when I've already thought about the idea of writing a book, but I haven't gone out and bought a new printer yet. I would say that I'm in business the second I really started scribbling down on a piece of paper, because then that date, and I know most of us are already past the business startup date, but that gives you less to have to amortize.
Okay. So, is asking, could you please repeat business startup versus business expenses again? It's a little bit confusing.
It's very confusing. Um, in the guide that I've written, there are like 6 different publications I suggest you read on business startup, just because it is so convoluted and worrisome. So is business startup is the day before you have determined, I'm going in business. I'm going to do this for profit. However, you're in business the second you start scribbling on paper. And so if if you've bought that ream of paper and you started writing today, that ream of paper is yesterday, and that is business startup. And that's what has to be amortized over 180 months, 15 years. Sorry, to close the door. And so business expense is you've already scribbled on that piece of paper. Tomorrow, you go out and buy the printer. Now that's a business expense.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
Now,
so you
there's
must amortize over 180 months, or is that an option you have?
no business startup is not an option. It's pre being in business.
Okay.
And so if you haven't done your taxes yet this year, go back and seriously think about, when did you actually start writing versus when you started acquiring paper and pencils and
Mm-hmm.
printers. Now, if it's a high ticket item, you've purchased the lab to your recording lab. That's not necessarily a business startup. That is a depreciable item. It's an office furniture type thing. It's not a business startup. Business startup would be you went out and rented your office before you bought your business license.
Mm-hmm.
I hope
Yeah.
that wasn't too awful.
Okay. So, what are the most common things that authors, and you are being an author, you've been doing this for yourself for a while, but what are some of the most common expenses that we can write off? And, are there any new rules or things that we should be aware of?
There's no rules, new rules. The best thing I can offer is when you set up your accounting books, be they on paper, an Excel spreadsheet, or tax preparation QuickBooks, set up your categories for your expenses based off of a Schedule C. Go ahead and download the Schedule C, and you'll see that it's under Part 2. It's called Expenses. It starts with line 8, advertising. Line 9 is car and truck expense. That's another one of those you have to dig into. Line 11 is contract labor. Line 13 is depreciation. And then you go into 15 is insurance other than health. 16 is interest. A is mortgage paid to the bank, and B is other. Other is the credit card expense or the credit card processing fee that you pay. And that's where you would put that. 17 is legal and professional expenses. That's where your tax preparer, your lawyer,
Mm-hmm.
or the narrator on your audiobook. That's where that would go. 18 is office expense. And that's where I put my bank fees if the bank charges you, as opposed to over there, because it's not interest, it's a bank fee. Line 20 is rent. If you rent a PO box for your business, that's rent,
Okay.
as opposed to having an office somewhere that you pay rent on. 21 is repairs and maintenance. 22 is supplies. Now, supplies, how I categorize my supplies is my books, the candy that I put on my table, the pens that I bought. If I just go out and buy pens, that's a supply. If I buy a pen that has my name on it, that's advertising.
Ah, okay.
So that's the difference. Now, the little business card holder, I put that under office supplies as opposed to excuse me, I put that under office expense as opposed to supplies. So just be consistent in whatever you.
Yeah, some of it's subjective, right? Could go in either place.
Exactly. 23 is taxes and license, your business license, your sales tax, your use tax that you pay to your, well, in my case, the sales tax is to the state. And also, if you hire your child and you pay federal income tax, which you must, you withhold it. That's where you would put that, make that entry. Line 24 is travel and meals. Meals has reverted back to you can only deduct 50%. Last year it was 100%, which was kind of cool, but it's reverted back to 50%. Line 25 is utilities. Now you cannot take your telephone. However, if you have a second line, for example, on my phone, when I had my portable miniature golf business, I had a second line on my iPhone. And so that is deductible. I had it through GoDaddy. So you could deduct that there. Line 26 is wages. Line 27 is other expenses, and that's on the back of the form. That's where you would put down your webinars, conferences you attend, the price of the conference, not the travel to the conference. And you've bought a new printer. You got the banner that says meet the author, things like that, as well as that's where your amortization is actually written down and said, this is how much it is. And then that's it.
So we have a question again from Denise. She's talking about categorizing the expenses of learning, like classes and summits and organizations, buying domain names and websites. So is that again subjective, or where would we put that?
Those would be under that line 28, under part 5, other expenses. Other expenses is where you haven't put anything else. You just haven't put it someplace else. And you can just lump, you've done 14 webinars. It came to $1,400. You don't have to itemize.
Right.
14.
Now, my business is probably a little bit different than many authors that are tuning in because I do coaching and I also have contractors that help. For example, I'm doing website updates, or I have a virtual assistant, and those are all contractor costs. My contractors are outside of the US. So how do you deal with those kinds of things?
Well, contract labor is under line 11.
Okay.
Because I don't deal with it, I would suggest you go to the irs.gov, download the instructions for Schedule C, and that will specifically give you information. Also, there's a search bar at the irs.gov. Put in foreign labor, and then that will bring up a multitude of, you can read on it. Another thing is you can just go to the internet, Google a question, and whomever you read oftentimes will cite the source of where they got it from.
Okay. Yeah.
And I see the question, by contractor, do you mean illustrators? Contractor is anybody you contract.
Yeah, if they're not an employee, but you're paying them money to do something for your business, then my understanding is if they are outside the US, and this is based on my accountant advising me at the beginning of this year about, you don't have to do 1099s for them because they are outside the US. If you are, and I do have a number of designers also that work with me and live in the US, so I am responsible also to do 1099s for them. And so that's like a whole nother topic, but it's something you should be aware of. If you've paid more than $600, I believe,
correct,
then you must submit a 1099 to them so they can claim that on their taxes.
Now, I did actually just stumble across something on the foreign thing, and there's a there's a document because they want to know how much is going out. They want to be in your business. They want to know what you're doing. There is a form, and I'll see if I can find it and email you the information. But there is a form out there for paying them. I don't think you have to do the 1099 like you said, but I think you have to declare it to the government.
Okay, thank you. That's good to know. All right. Laura is asking about what line did you say they need to claim what it was paid for a child?
Oh, child. So child would be under wages. Now, there's a great article. The website is called Patriot something. It's a software company that I think is trying to get you to sign up your payroll with them. And I read the article on it, and they pointed out that you can hire your child, and you have to withhold federal income tax. You have to file a W-4. You have to do the I-9. You have to do them like a real live wage, but make sure the job is age appropriate. You wouldn't put your 10-year-old on a backhoe, maybe if you're on a farm, but probably not, but it has to be age appropriate. Make sure that the wage that you're paying the child is indeed a fair market wage.
Mhm.
If you were hiring not your child, make sure the wage is fair. You also wouldn't want to pay that child $25 when the going wage is only 10. So it has to be a fair wage. I just wrote this down, and I don't know what I did with it, but it's called patriotsoftware.com. And you would Google it, just put in search hiring your child. And he has a list of 10 points to make sure that hiring you're complying with employment laws, child labor laws. You also have to make sure that what your child is doing is specifically for your work. You can't just be cleaning the house because you're doing something else. It must be for that business. And you want to write a contract defining what the child's job is and sign it. There's things to it that make sure that you guys that the child is living up to what, because the IRS takes a real dim view on children being employed. But it's royalties to your child if you wrote a book together. Well, having not done that, I'm not sure how the royalties are set up, whether it's in both their names or one or the other's names. So whomever gets the royalties is who has to file the schedule.
Right. So I think what she was saying is if the child is listed as a co-author and you then divvy up the royalties and you pay those to your co-author.
I would think somebody the whole amount has to be declared one way or another, whether it's on one Schedule C or on two.
Okay.
If it's on two, then you would also have to divide your expenses. And that might be proportionate. Maybe the child is too young to actually do internet research. So under the utilities category, that portion of the internet would be all of yours and zero to the child.
Right. Yeah, it can get tricky.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the time when you start having to make sure that you have a person that you can reach out to, an accountant that'll help you with some of that. Oh, Dottie was asking, is it 400 or 600 for the 1099 that a contractor needs to make?
It's 600 for the 1099. You as a self-employed person, the threshold is 400.
Okay. Would you be able to comment on self-employment tax and how that happens as you're filing your return as well, doesn't it?
It's at the end of the year, and that's when you based on your total expenses minus from your income, whether you have a profit or loss. If you have a loss, it just goes on your 1040, your personal 1040, comes off your income before they start charging tax. Excuse me. If it's a positive number, you've made a profit, that goes over to the Schedule SE, and then you'll fill out it and do the percentage, which I believe is 15%.
Okay.
I haven't had to do it for a while, but you would do, I think it's 15% of your profit. And then you pay that into, that's your own personal Medicare account or Social Security account. And then however much that was, half of that comes back again to the 1040 and comes off the bottom line there also. So you really are, you may be paying in the whole amount, but you get to take half of it off your personal income tax.
Okay. Again, another one of those reasons why I like to have folks like you helping prepare, because it can get really complicated, can't it?
Yes, it can.
And we talked about mileage earlier today. Maybe we have it might be worth just briefly mentioning about what the mileage rate is and how that would be calculated.
So the mileage rate is definitely well worth. I suggested on your day planner at January 1, and it's not too late to go think back on the mileage that's on your vehicle right this minute. Think back how much have you driven, and mark it January 1st. This is the mileage that was on my vehicle. And even if it's not 100% accurate, it's okay. You'll make up the difference as you go. At the end of the year, December 31, mark down that mileage also. Pretend that you've driven your vehicle through 30,000 miles this year. You must add up all the business miles you drove, and you must also add all the commuting miles you drove. Those two figures will ultimately make the other miles you drove. So, for example, you work, you have a W-2 job. Let's make it easy. You worked 10 days this year. This is really a gross exaggeration because you would work probably 270, 300 days. My husband, 275 days of the year, he drives 52 miles up and back, total 52 miles. That makes 14,300 miles of commuting time. For my business, on my day planner, I go to town once a week. And for example, in my case, Walmart I'm 21 miles from town. So my round trip to Walmart is 42 miles. But I go to town, Walmart is here. I go past it. I go to a bookstore that's 3 more miles. I go to another bookstore that's 3 more miles. Now we've got 6 miles beyond Walmart. And then I go have lunch with my friend, 1 more mile. So that 1 more mile and back, now that makes 2 miles. 1 plus 1 is 2. And my 6 that I get to take, which is 12, adds up to my round trip of 42. So my whole entire trip for the day was 70-some miles, of which I can deduct 7. So on my day planner,
the ones that are related to your business.
Correct. So that 7 miles I put on my day planner on Tuesday. Next Tuesday, I'll do another. So at the end of the year, I've added up all my business expenses. So my husband has driven 14,300. I've driven 1,000. So those 3 lines, under business, I'll put 1,000. Under commute, I'll put 14,300. Let's pretend that we drove 30,000 miles. No, that's not a good one because I can't think off the top of my head. But the 30,000 minus the 1,000 minus the 14,000 gives you those other miles. And
Right.
so at 65.5 cents per mile, you don't have to go very far for it to add up to an awful lot of money. And so you can choose to use actual expenses on your vehicle, but unless it's a beater, the chances are pretty good that mileage is really going to take you a long ways.
So 65.5 cents per mile is the expense you get to deduct.
Yes, and you have to Google that every year. Just ask what the standard mileage rate, because it changes. As soon ago as a year ago, it was 58 cents. And the year before that, half the year was 55 and the other half was 58. So that's something you'll have to look up every year.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do we have any other questions specific to taxes? Okay, I don't see any. Oh, yes, I see a hand raised. Go ahead, AJ.
I'm trying to formulate it in my head. It was something that you said before in a couple of your meetings, I believe. And I can't remember specifically how you worded it, but you said something about 2 years. You get 2 years to file as a business. Oh, no, no. I can't remember what it was, but you said something about you have 2 years to go back and
Yeah, I think
make
it was the
the
startup
profit.
costs. You can go
Okay.
back up to 2 years. And I think that came from a discussion with my accountant, Michelle Hughes, when we had her on for the Authorpreneur Summit. Does that sound right to you as well, Jan?
Well, you can amend your taxes up to 3 years.
Okay.
So, without knowing the specifics of the question,
So what it came down
Well,
to, if I'm remembering this discussion correctly, is if it takes you 2 years in the making where you're doing startup things, you're writing, you're doing a number of things, but you haven't officially started your business yet, you can go back 2 years,
oh,
but not
yes,
more than that as like
okay,
startup costs.
okay,
right.
so I'll give myself as an example. For example, I still haven't. As you know, I worked on my Christmas book, but I haven't published it. I wanted to do it last year, got sick. Then I wanted to do it this year. So basically, I've just been spending money, and money just has been going out on contractors and all these other things that make a book. Of course, that it costs to produce a book, but there is no income from it. So then I start to wonder, was this going to look like it's a hobby as opposed to me trying to make it a business because I haven't made a profit, because I haven't sold it. I haven't officially published it yet, nor made a penny on it. That's
So in that case, again, as I said earlier, the amortization is 15 years. So yes, you have all these expenses. Is there a way to, in your mind, go back? For one, you can't take an expense until you have income. And yes, you can take expenses off that. It's called a holdover. And so the next year you would mark down what you weren't able to take. And it would again come up to how much you earned that year is how much you can start deducting off. And you do take the oldest expenses first and work it that way. But if there's any way that you can say that you went into business, your intent was to do this X number of years ago, even though you haven't made a profit, it's not necessarily a startup cost. Does that make sense?
I was going to ask you to repeat that part. You said, even though I haven't made a profit, it's not a startup cost, or it is a startup cost?
Your intent back 2 years ago was to be in business. And so trying to determine what truly is a startup cost versus you just haven't made a profit yet. You've been in business all this time, but you haven't made a profit yet because you don't want to amortize for the next 15 years. If there's any way possible, you don't want to do that.
And on that, I'm in a very expensive state where, in terms of getting an LLC, so it's almost $900 to do that, and I just keep putting it off because because of that. Because it's like, well, if I'm not generating a profit yet or haven't gotten to that point yet, I don't, So I kind of waited because of that. Where I know some other states is much less expensive to do that.
Well, keep in mind, you do not have to be an LLC to be an author.
Yeah.
All you have to do is file a Schedule C with your Social Security number.
Okay.
Or if you don't want to use your Social Security number, apply to the IRS for an EIN number. And there's no monetary requirements for that either. And
right. You can be a sole proprietor, AJ, and that's fine. That's perfectly fine.
hmm I think the only thing is I know one of the recommendations for me before was to, because I want to, and maybe you can speak to that too, because I think you said your author name is J. Butler. I don't know if you use that as your pen name, but I plan to use a pen name. And so I was advised, or maybe you might want to do it as a LLC and everything. So that's why, but I'm not really sure. I'm still reading up on that part, or as opposed to doing it as a sole proprietor, because then you have to, or even when we had, I just forgot his name. I'm sorry, Josh, when he was talking about trademarks and say, I want to do a serious and everything like that. When you do the application, that becomes a public record. And so I'm told sometimes it's better to do LLC, because then your address and all that stuff is not out there in the public, because the trademark, as you see, all that stuff is public.
In Nevada, that's true. If you file as an LLC, which is what my portable miniature golf course was, you have to have a registered agent, and it's their address that is being used for if you get served with papers or what's being. However, even with the LLC, it was my street address that was used in my tax documents and in my like taxes with the county.
Okay, that's good to know. Thanks.
Yeah.
And I see the question, what about donating books that you want to give to your community? You've written those off when you've put it at your supplies.
So that becomes, when you purchase the books, that's the expense that you take in. You don't get to claim it again when you donate them.
Correct.
Okay. All right, so let me see. Do we have any other final questions around accounting, filing? Go ahead, Leslie.
Yeah, hi. Just because I was writing, last October is when I signed up for April's self-publishing course, okay? And then during that time, I sent my books to my editor. I think it was in November. Bobby Hinman took a look at them. And then but I did my website in February, and I published my books in June. Okay. So I started making money sort of in June. So I guess I'm a little confused on the startup, on whether, I've been a writer forever, but that was when I really became a business. Let's put it that way. So all of my expenses prior, I'm going back to 2022, not this past fall. Okay. So for the things for this year, okay, I've been in business this entire year, or starting, I've started selling books in June. So I'm just, as far as where, and I'm a sole proprietor, I'm going that route. So I guess, I'm not sure what my question is, except I guess it is on business startup, because I considered all this stuff, I don't know, go ahead.
I think you went into business in February when you started designing your website.
Okay.
That's how, if it was me, that's what I would be doing, is my startup date would be February 1st or whatever.
I started the website. Okay.
Yeah, because that was obviously an intent to go into business. And you've been writing for, I'm sure you've got some sort of publication somewhere that shows that you've been writing longer. So obviously that's not a startup cost.
Okay.
If your books are returned by Amazon, so there is a section, and if Amazon has paid you, and then there's a return and Amazon takes the money back from you. So up in part 2 is called income. There is line 2 is called returns and allowances. So you've made $10,000 for the year. Amazon took away $100 or $1,000. You deduct that. And in line 3 is self-explanatory. Subtract 2 from 1.
Okay. Makes sense.
Did I miss any questions? Did I answer everything?
I think we got all of the tax related ones. So you're welcome to hang out with us still, Jan. I'm going to continue to open it up for other self-publishing questions as well. And if anybody comes, oh, wait a minute. I do have Denise has her hand raised. Go ahead, Denise. Sorry about that.
Hey, I just want to clear something up. as to where it starts. So like last January, I'm thinking is where I started at the beginning of the year because I signed up for the author summits and I signed up for an author coaching class that I took for about 6 months. So that would have been my start of where everything, the intent and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you would call where I started my my journey here. Um, at the beginning of January of 23. So that would have been the start when I had the germ of the idea of everything, and that would have been
That's when I would have, your intent then was to go into business.
Right.
that's even though it was just an idea of can I write a book and everything. It's even though nothing has really been published or anything, and I'm still working on the manuscripts and just taking classes and summits and buying equipment, and I had to buy a new laptop and buying the microphone, the bloggy thing and stuff. I haven't done the blog yet and stuff, and just setting up the website now and stuff.
Just keep in mind that anything, you cannot start deducting anything until you have income to go against it.
So it's
just,
not like, see,
so-
that's where I got conflicting information from somebody else, is that they said, oh, because you're taking classes and coaching courses and stuff, it's just like being in college and you can deduct all that stuff.
but you can deduct it, but you can't deduct it until you have income to go against it. For example, you paid out $500. Let's go the other way. You paid out $1,000 for these classes and you made $500. You may be limited. So let's make it 600. You may be limited to only deducting $600 and still have $400 hanging out there that you can't take until you earn more the next year towards that total of what you spent.
So because nothing's being earned this year, I can't take anything off.
Correct. You have to have income in order to have expenses that you can actually utilize. Now you can have a loss. Once you have the income, you can go in the hole, but you have to have income to go in the hole in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
If you just go to irs.gov and download your Schedule C and look at line 29, that'll say tentative profit or loss. And that kind of, and you read the instructions, that'll define for you
Mm-hmm.
what you can do with that.
My husband's not going to be a happy camper. All the money I've been spending on these classes, he's not going to be a happy camper. Thank you.
The classes are worth it. I mean, maybe not buying the equipment yet, but the classes are
Well, I
definitely.
needed a laptop. My laptop died. I had to buy a new laptop. That's, something that had to happen.
And so make sure that you keep track of personal use versus, unless it's exclusive to writing, there's a percentage. How much time do you spend personally versus business wise? Because I have one computer, actually I have three, but I still use personal stuff. And so you just, is it 50-50? Is it 75-25? Whatever. A lot. How much is personal versus business?
He's not going to be having all the summit money and stuff that I've been spending, and that
Information. Make sure you save it all, because in the
oh,
fall.
I got a whole folder of what I
Yep.
call publishing expenses that I keep putting all the receipts into it.
Yep. So you'll be able to pull that as soon as you start making money.
I guess I better get these things into editing.
Yes. All right. Go ahead, AJ. I see you have your hand up as well. Whoops.
Nancy had a question earlier.
Okay, go ahead.
I was saying, oh, I'm sorry. I thought I was talking. I didn't know it was muted.
Please.
I'm sorry. Thank you for sending that box. I didn't realize it wasn't unmuted. I was saying I had one question, but now I have two only because of something that you said. So you were answering my question about Amazon, and this is not my issue, but I know in previous workshops, April mentioned that, there's always, but I don't know if it's Amazon or Ingram Sparks, where you take a loss when people send back the books, and she's had students who actually have decided, well, just ship it back to me, but that ended up costing more than actually just taking and just saying just destroy it. And I hate the thought of destroying it, and you can't necessarily donate it. But if I'm just curious, like if that student had it shipped to them when customers didn't want the book and they sent it back to Amazon or Ingram Sparks, would they be able to write off a certain amount of that shipping back and everything? I know there was something you said that certain things you already wrote off to begin with. So I was curious about that. And then the second question I have is, because I'm conflating different workshops now, but I know at one of the workshops, and I think it may have been at the summit or maybe it was afterwards, one of the speakers mentioned that you can actually loan yourself money, which is what I did my first year. Like you can loan yourself money for this project, for like I did for the book, but it never happened. But I think she said there's a form, and she couldn't remember. There's a form you can have about loaning yourself that when you loan yourself money. And I don't know if that's something that should be done when you're trying to do a startup or not, because your startup is everything is you're loaning money from yourself anyway. You're borrowing money from yourself anyway. Oh, excuse me.
I don't know that I can answer that question. With regards to the first one, if they reimburse that person for shipping and handling, then that's an expense you've paid, and therefore you can write it off. That would go under business expense, your postage. As far as loaning yourself money, now I loan myself money for the portable miniature golf course. And as an LLC, I could do that. And there were significant tax consequences that I cannot answer with regards to a Schedule C. So you have to talk to a tax preparer over that, a tax advisor. That's just way beyond the scope of the Schedule C. I'm sorry.
I do. What I will say is when this was, I believe, brought up during the Authorpreneur Summit and the discussion specifically with Michelle Hughes, who's my accountant. And she, I think, was really referring to, depending on what type of business formation that you have. For example, if you have, if you're an LLC, but you're taxed as I think it's an S Corp or a C Corp, there's all different things. Then you can do some things and not others. And so it was in the context of business formation, what you can and cannot do in those areas. So I agree that, I would get advice from an accountant or an attorney if necessary, just to make sure that you're staying within the legal guidelines.
Yes. And back to Nancy, she said, I used a company called Reedsy, so they take care of all that I paid for, right? I don't know that. You need to contact Reedsy and find out what they've done or not done. If you paid Reedsy, you can take it as an expense, but I don't know what you mean by they take care of all that.
So when you contract, when you hire a freelancer from Fiverr or Reedsy or freelancer.com, you are creating a project. Their freelancers bid on it, or you invite freelancers to it, and you pay Reedsy. And then Reedsy, once you are satisfied with the milestones that are delivered to you, will then pay the individual. So whether or not taxes are included or you're responsible for any taxes, like for example, the whole 1099, I don't believe you need to worry about that with Reedsy expenses, but I would definitely recommend researching that, maybe even reaching out to their help section and making sure that you are abiding by the legal requirements that you need to take.
Yeah, make sure you're not the one responsible for making those payments.
Mhm. Yep. All right. Taking care of the 1099 forms. Nancy, is that a question, or do you want to expand on that a little bit more?
I think you're muted.
I'm not seeing Nancy. Oh, there she goes. I think we might have lost Nancy.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, okay.
okay. When I wrote, taking care of, that was from my question from above. Does Reedsies take care of that aspect?
Oh, yeah.
So that's why I
Yeah.
wrote.
Not sure. Yeah, not quite sure
Gotcha.
if it's the case. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So we are at the top of the hour. I am okay with staying a little longer for those who are interested in if you've got some self-publishing Q&A outside of taxes, then you can feel free to go ahead and ask those questions, and I'll extend time here a little bit longer if you'd like. And thank you so much, Jan, for joining me today. You talked about a guide that you had put together. How can people get that guide? Could you share some contact info or where they could find it on a website?
Well, it's not completed. You guys have added an awful lot of sections to it today. So I am in the process of getting it finalized. I hope to have it done by the end of the week, end of next week at worst. Go to nomadpublicationsnv@yahoo.com. Send me an email and give me your address, and I will send you a PDF.
So Nomad Publications
NV as in Nevada,
NV at
yahoo.com.
.com. Wonderful. And I'll keep everybody in the loop so that once you share that information with me, I can let people know that it is available once we've got that connection. Perfect.
That's good.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed chatting about a Schedule C.
Happy to have you. And I have some follow-up things that I'd like to chat with you about later, just you and I, because I've got some ideas and things that I think could be helpful for other authors as well. I'd love to partner with you on.
Thank you.
All right. So next, any self-publishing questions that you have? So Nancy says, I'm uploading my book to KDP and my cover is not looking right when I preview it. I can't figure out how to fix it. So Nancy, why don't you take yourself off mute and tell me a little bit, did you have a designer create your cover? How did the cover created?
I've been using Reedsy for everything so far. They edited it, they copy edited it, they made a book cover, and they marked I got a marketing lady. So I'm using them for basically everything.
Okay.
So tonight, and for the past month, on a daily basis, I've been trying to get this book uploaded. First, I was doing in Sparks, and I finally just stopped with that because I was about ready to punch my screen on the computer.
Both KDP and Ingram and Lulu and wherever you're going to try to upload your books, they all have a similar type of thing. So the similar type of frustration, it takes time to get used to it. I think that after publishing well over 500 books of my own and on behalf of my authors, there's not much that I have not run into. So if you would like to share a screen, I'm happy to give you some advice, and we can step through and see if I can help you resolve the issue.
Okay. And how do we do that? Now or later time?
Yeah, feel free to go ahead and so while you're do you know how to share a screen on Zoom?
I do not.
Okay, because in your Zoom window you have a share screen. First, open the window, like get into your KDP account, and then come back to Zoom. And in the window, like the same place you go to unmute yourself or to turn on or off your video, just go over a little further and you'll see a share screen button it's green with an arrow pointing up, and sometimes it's tucked under the more with the ... But then once you share, you'll be able to share any of your windows that are open. And let's look at it together. We can figure it out. Common mistakes I see with uploads. So if you are using Readsy, that tells me that you're using a professional designer. They're pre-vetted. So my assumption is that they gave you the correct files. So I'm going to just lead with that assumption. It's not always the case, but I'll assume that that is the case. And then, so common issues that I see are potentially choosing the wrong size when you're selecting what size your files are, your book is.
Okay.
Another thing is bleed, full bleed or not. That's a confusing thing that people sometimes choose the wrong thing. And once you fix that, it makes everything look fine. So those are a couple of areas we can look at together.
Okay, so when I do it, I'm gonna go back and pull it up in a second, but when I do it, the format that Reezy sent me on the very bottom with the measurements is in what I uploaded from my book cover.
I'm not sure I understand what you mean.
I know it's hard to explain because I'm so new at this.
Show me that, and worst case, if you're interested in hanging out a little bit after everybody drops, we could do it more one-on-one if that makes it a little bit easier for you.
Okay, let me see if I can figure out how to pull it up first and let you continue with everybody else.
Sure, no problem. Other questions while we're waiting? Bye, Margaret. Thanks for joining. Okay. Let's see if we got any questions on YouTube here. All right, if you're watching on YouTube and you have self-publishing questions, feel free to post your question. Okay. And it's okay, we don't have to stay if you guys don't really have a lot of extra questions or things like that, then we can move on. And I do this every Wednesday. So whether you are someone that is in one of my courses or just, someone who just needs a little guidance, I do these Wednesday sessions as my service to the author community. So drop in and take a look. And whenever we have these sessions, I'm happy to answer your questions. All right, so I see Nancy, you're sharing a video now. Is that right? Yes, you're sharing your screen.
Okay.
But what we're seeing is, okay, so you've got, what you have here is an Ingram Spark cover. And the reason why I know that is because you see in the bottom left corner, it says lightning source.
Yes.
And so this is perfect bound cover template, which means this is the paperback cover and it's a 6x9 size, but it is formatted for Ingram Spark. So this is your Ingram Spark version of your cover.
Now how do I get my KDP?
Yeah, you can't use this for KDP. You can use it for Ingram Spark. So if you wanted to go into Ingram Spark, we can walk through that. But you need to get back to the individual that provided you with this cover and make sure that they're sending you'll have a different version that is designed for KDP, which will not have this. It'll basically be just the cover. It won't have all of these other tick marks and everything outside of it, which equates to the information that Ingram Spark uses for their cover uploads.
Okay, that's exactly what I was looking. So I got to go back to them and explain to them I need it for KDP, not Ingram Sparks.
Or both. I always do both.
Oh, both. Okay.
That's because the reason why I like to do it for both is because Ingram Spark is my preferred distributor. I don't like doing expanded distribution on KDP. And what that means is your distribution is, are you going to sell outside of Amazon? And there is a box when you're setting up things on KDP that says expanded distribution. Yes. And that means Amazon can like make it available to others like Barnes and Noble and other, other libraries and bookstores and things like that. But not very many people are going to buy your book from Amazon if they are a bookstore or a library, because Amazon is the big guy that is putting a lot of these places out of business or causing all kinds of angst in the literary community. So I instead, plus it's also very limited with what they do with your distribution. So I choose to go to Ingram Spark. I might have a paperback on KDP and a paperback on Ingram Spark. So same ISBN, two different, slightly different formats for your cover.
Okay.
Are may vary slightly. It depends on the type of book you're doing. But so you're uploading the same files, the same versions of your book, just slightly different formats. And Ingram Spark becomes your distributor. So you can enable it for distribution. And then when you click to enable it after it's approved by you, you can say, yes, enable it for distribution. And that will go to Barnes and Noble online, to tons of bookstores and libraries, and others have access to it. I think it's over 35,000, maybe even over 40,000 different places that have access. And it will automatically appear on barnesandnoble.com. It takes a little longer to get to Target.com and Walmart.com, but it will go there as a result of using that distribution network as well. So it's a great opportunity.
So it's best to do probably both.
I would do both.
Okay.
And one new feature that Ingram Spark has, it's starting to roll out. It's in beta right now, but it gives you the opportunity to create a link that you can give to anybody, any person, to go and directly buy your book, and it will do like the print on demand. So it will be fulfilled by Ingram and shipped to them. So it is helping to support authors with direct sales from their website.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's going to be my first step, to make sure I get the right files from the lady.
Absolutely.
From RECCE. Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I will be in contact again, I'm sure.
No problem. Okay, Jan, you said you can't find where to raise your hand. Yeah, so your comment was, isn't Ingram now who Draft2Digital is using for distribution? They're using them for printing, for sure, for the print distribution. So yes, for printing, because Draft2Digital only like distributed ebooks for a while, and then they added a print version, which I was like, oh, do we have another platform we need to go into? But then they revealed that they're actually just tying into Ingram Sparks to do the printing of your print books. But for people that are looking for an easier platform to learn, many people say that Draft2Digital is much simpler. I don't know, I've heard complaints about all of them. I think it's just, whenever something is new to you, it's a pain to learn. So, but yes, they are now doing print books, and it does pass it through to Ingram for fulfillment of those print books.
Okay, because I've been using Draft2Digital now for over a year, and that's where I buy my books to resell to the various clients I have that buy my books. So thank you.
How do you like the Draft2Digital as far as like ease of use and things like that?
Well, having it being the first one I've ever done, I really thought that it was easy. Their customer service was fabulous. Every time I had an issue, it did not take, you can call them direct and talk to them, and they answer the phone that day, and so I did not find it difficult at all. It was easy.
Yeah, the other benefit of using Draft2Digital is that they will distribute your ebook to more than just Amazon. So if you're sticking with KDP only for your ebook, then you know, you've got the exclusivity. You can get, you know, Kindle Unlimited is a program that KDP has, but it requires you to be exclusive to Amazon. So you can, with Draft to Digital, if you publish your ebook there, it goes, it publishes to a number of locations like Apple Books and Google Books and Amazon and a number of other ebook locations as well. So if your goal is to be less dependent on Amazon, and I mean, there's a whole group called Wide for the Win. If you're looking for people to, you know, your people are there if you're looking to try to limit how many things you're focusing on or around Amazon. And that could be something to research and to look into. Thank you for sharing that, Jan. Okay.
And I have to go. My husband just walked in the door. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for taking the time to listen. I appreciate it.
Thank you for being here. We appreciate your expertise.
Bye.
Awesome. All right. Any final questions before we shut down for the day? Let me just quickly check one more peek at my friends on YouTube. I just want to give a shout out to those on YouTube who are watching and who have been following this channel, whether you're watching this on replay. I want to mention that 75% of you are watching these videos regularly, but not subscribed to the channel. My encouragement is subscribe, click that bell icon and get notifications when we go live. We have a lot of great events coming and things that are going to be exclusive for these live type calls. And I'd love to have you as part of the community. So if this has been valuable to you, go on to the YouTube channel, subscribe. And if you are joining me because you've heard about this through my Facebook group, welcome, glad to have you here. My Facebook is Learn to Self-Publish with April Cox. It is 100% free. We've got lots of great things going on there as well. So thank you all for joining me, and I hope you will continue to tune in and let me know what kinds of things that you're looking to get covered so that I can help to support growth for the author community. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.